Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Fireside chat with yours truly, Dalya, and my two incredible guests, our board chair, Priscilla, and our previous board chair, Trina. And we are going to do intros in just a hot second here, but I wanted to take a moment to just give a little bit of a container. So our fireside chat tonight is hoping to pull back the curtain on some of our leadership practices and our governance at WAVAW. And we just wanted to remind everybody that given that we are a feminist, anti-oppressive, decolonizing organization who does our best at living into our values, that we want to say that this space is going to be rooted in non-judgment, in the spirit of failing forward, and in evoking a brave space to talk about things that are really important to us in our hearts and what has us doing this work. So I also wanted to start by doing a territory acknowledgement with tons of gratitude and say that WAVAW acknowledges that we have the great opportunity to learn and create change and be of service and employ folks on the unceded, ancestral, and occupied traditional lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And that we're abundantly grateful to the Indigenous people of Turtle Island who have been caring and thoughtful stewards of these lands since time immemorial. We deeply honor the incredible resistance and resilience and strength of Indigenous peoples in the face of ongoing dispossession and colonial violence, and acknowledge that unceded land was never given to settlers. It was stolen through the doctrine of discovery and continues to be occupied and governed by settlers today. We believe it's important to continue reflecting and speaking about this ongoing colonial violence and to keep it in mind as we learn and respond to and heal from sexual violence. And also acknowledge that this ongoing colonial project reinforces and enforces the gender binary and all of our systems of domination. So an important reflection, I think, as we move into conversations around governance and very intentional spaces that we, I believe, try to live into at WAVA as we navigate what it means to do decolonizing work in our governance work. So as I said, my name is Dalya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining today from Musqueam territory. I'll pass it over to Priscilla and invite you to introduce yourself, and also if you have any reflections that you wanted to share about our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Ait Snate, good evening and hokominum. Ait Qualis Alice Nama, Tal Squish Priscilla Omulo, Talit Silkwa, Sartlip, Lita Quill, a visitor on the unceded territory of Coquitlam, which is shared territory of Kakite and Keetsi. So good evening, it's good to see you. I am from Sartlip and I live as a visitor here. I guess my only reflection for the acknowledgement is that, you know, for me, doing these acknowledgements is not just a process or protocol. It's about really grounding ourselves as well in recognizing where we have privilege and where our place is, and doing this work moving forward to support us in doing it in a good way. And so I'm glad that there is such gratitude in the way that you yourself and WAVA does an acknowledgement, that it comes from this genuine place of wanting to dismantle systems, and that's appreciated, definitely. So thank you.
Trina, I'll invite you to introduce yourself.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Trina. My pronouns are they, them, and very honored to be joining you folks today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Kaiket, Stolo, and Coquitlam First Nations. I've always lived on unceded territories my whole life. I grew up on the territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And so for me, it's really important to really think about what it means to be an uninvited person. I say uninvited person instead of uninvited guest because I don't consider myself a guest. I was invited, neither was my family. And so I think that's really important for me to really kind of always bring that in. And I think continue my journey because I will never stop learning about how to really think about decolonization and reconciliation and in all that I do. I really want to do my very best to make that action something that I bring to WAVA's board, to my job, and to my day-to-day. So something I'm always thinking about and bringing in. So I just really appreciate the space, and so much of what I've learned comes from my time through WAVA, through the amazing folks that I've learned from. So really appreciate being here today for this.
Awesome. Thank you both. So as we often do, I wanted to just start with a little check-in, see how you're both doing, how you're landing here this evening. I forgot to say that this is not a live, this is being pre-recorded, and so the chat function will be open, but during the time that this is streamed, a WAVA staff member will be available to answer any questions that folks have. And yeah, if you want to check in, I think my question for tonight is, who do you want to bring into this conversation when you think about leadership, when you think about governance? Whose shoulders are you standing on? Who has inspired you? Who do you want to bring in here and hold close to your heart as we have this chat?
I can jump in.
Go for it.
Yeah. So it's funny because I knew this question. It's so I appreciate that because we had a conversation pre-recording. And for me, whenever I'm asked whose shoulders I'm building off of, my first thing is I don't want to miss anyone. I'm so concerned that by giving a shout out, I also don't want to miss anyone, but so many people deserve shout outs at the same time. Definitely, as I talk about my journey through WAVA, I'm thinking of, you know, my co-volunteers when I first started on the crisis line. I think about all of them very often. We're a very close group. definitely think about all the volunteer training liaisons that I've learned from and the staff at WAVA, and then all the folks that I was able to learn from during that time, which was absolutely amazing, from the folks that supported me as I learned my journey in the crisis line to the hospital accompaniment right through. So definitely, I think that's I'm thinking of the WAVA community that has really brought me to this space. All board members that I'm currently on the board with and previously have been on the board with. And so, yeah, I think those are the few folks that really just kind of stick for me right now. And again, I don't, it's that nervous. I don't want to just start because I'm going to miss folks. And there's so many, but just know that all of you who have those connections to WAVA are on my mind tonight.
So,
I think that, for me, it's like those foundational pieces of when doing this work, I think of, and day to day, I think of all of those who have survived colonization and residential school, and how I'm here today. And so the shoulders that I stand on are the people who were warriors, people who fought, people who are advocates in the community, the founding mothers of WAVA, and why this happened, in the way it did to get organized, to build this organization in the vision and views, and how those visions and views have shifted throughout the years of learning and unlearning. And the elders that have given me these teachings to be able to do the work, and especially Lillian Howard, and it's people like her who shared their story about what they've experienced in their life, whether it be sexualized violence, whether it be residential school, whether it be systemic racism, and all of the struggles and successes of these elders are really what ground me and give me those shoulders to kind of continue on their work even after they're gone. Yeah. It's a little early to be crying. What am I doing?
it's okay. We're going to be all up in our feels, I'm sure, at many different points in this conversation. There's no question. The reality of doing heart-centered work for community is so real. Thank you both for that. Yeah, I'm also thinking about people in my life, like Lillian, also I'll name Barbara Binns and Patty Moore, people who were part of my Langara women's studies experience, who really made me feel like things that I was talking about and thinking about mattered, and fit somewhere in community, and really encouraged me to connect with WAVA. And so just really honoring them and those relationships that were so meaningful for so many years. Okay, so this is a great segue to asking you both, why WAVA? What brought you to this work? Why have you chosen to volunteer your time? Because we want to acknowledge the board is completely volunteer driven. And so you actively are choosing every day that we connect, every time I schedule another meeting or ask you to show up, that you're actively choosing to be here. So why here? What brought you to the work? Why WAVA and not another place? Is it better if I volunteer you? Okay,
Yeah.
go.
I looked around a bit at first to see, where could I volunteer? I wanted to give energy and time to something that felt meaningful, something that, I could share what I've known and what, would hopefully help make positive change somewhere. And I wanted to be really careful as to where, especially when it comes to somewhere that supports folks who've experienced any type of violence, because I have done a lot of work in nonprofit, and I know that there are some views that don't align with mine. And I felt like WAVA has in understanding, indigenization, reconciliation, two-spirited, non-binary, and wanting to be allies is a space and place that I wanted to be and put my energy in. So it just felt like a good fit.
For me, when because I moved here 9 years ago, soon to be 10. And when I was moving here, I had done some work in my undergrad around raising awareness around sexual assault and really supporting survivors in my university, and being a survivor myself, it was something I was really passionate about. And so when I first moved out here, I was looking at the local sexual assault centers and was wondering how could I get involved. And WAVA, I think it was meant to be. I definitely found WAVA, and it was an amazing experience from the moment I stepped through those doors, right from the interview right through. And I was like, I want to be here. And then the training to be on the line, and the community, I felt it was the first community I had in the Lower Mainland when I moved here. So that meant so much to me, and it stayed that way this whole time. And I think the career I'm in now wouldn't exist if it wasn't for WAVA. I think the way that I see the world wouldn't exist if it wasn't for WAVA, and the community that I've built through that. So when I had finished up working on the crisis line and did hospital accompaniment for a little bit, I wanted to continue to stay involved. And so the board just seemed like a wonderful fit, and I just seemed to find the right time when I applied, and it's been a wonderful ride. So yeah.
Amazing. And we're so grateful to both of you for all of your service and your commitment to community. It really is so inspiring. We're so grateful for your time. Okay, my next question for you is, what does it mean to be part of the board? What does governance mean for you? And what's your favorite part of the work that we get to do together?
I'm ready to start with this one. I can, you can keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think this question is so interesting to me, because I think when you hear of a board, I think a lot of us might think of a certain kind of demographic and a certain kind of what does a board look like, and and those kind of things, and maybe kind of stuffy behind the scenes, maybe people with tons of money. There's these stereotypes that we have of boards and what these boards are and what they mean and for an organization. And so for me, being on a board for an organization like WAVA, where we really believe in our values and really believe in people first and what we're doing for survivors, it's different. It's so different. And so I think first and foremost, I think we at the board, we have to exist in order for WAVA to be a nonprofit. Like that's the understanding of it. However, at the same time, I think we hold deep conversations, deep intention, and we really try to always be at a space in the board where it's a collaboration with you, Dalya. It's a collaboration with each other. It's understanding how we can support the organization versus trying to and be there as maybe a part of the roots of the organization versus being a part that's not helping it grow. And I love metaphors like that, but I just think it really kind of, for me, that's what kind of fits and what I kind of always try and sit with. I know when I first became the board chair, I attended this workshop, and they were saying if you want to be part of a board, you have to have a really big ego because you are basically going into this organization that you know nothing about and are now in one of the leadership roles. And I was like, I get what you're saying, but then it felt really weird to me, why do board members have nothing to do with the organization until they're on the board, or how do they not have that understanding or knowledge of the organization? And so I was a bit different because I had the deep training through the volunteer training. And so I think to me, I thought that was very interesting. So I wanted to kind of break that down a little bit, make sure that also the new board members that came on also had the opportunity to learn about the organization in a really authentic way. So those are a couple of thoughts that I have around that question. And I'm going to stay away with answering the question, what does governance mean? Because I still don't fully understand it myself. It's a very colonial word that I'm like, not my thing.
Yeah, I think that for me, I see it as we are there to be cheerleaders and to be a part of that think tank, to be advocates when needed, to be fundraisers, and to just really support direction and growth, and whether it be growing pains or celebrations, whatever that looks like. And as a board, for us to be able to do that so it's not falling on the shoulders of the leadership team of the organization itself. So I feel like we're just there as kind of a balance, a supporter, to be able to have that outside perspective of what's happening. Because if everyone had that inside perspective, like you were talking about, Trina, and then we would be so invested in the way things are, the way they used to be, without actually being able to objectively be able to make decisions, or but be it financial or otherwise. And so I feel like that's kind of where I see us doing things. And we're also like that little piece of the, like you said, the colonial part, right? Like, WAVAW does the best to decolonize, and how we're structured as a board is very different than way you may see other boards. And like you said, who's on it, but it's also because we're decolonizing the things in the places that we can, but there are some things that we just can't. And until the system is dismantled, then we exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the appreciation that I have, even though it is this colonial structure that says that as a charity or a nonprofit, we have to have a board and all of that, I really see the board as that linked community, that every single seat on the board and how we've chosen to do recruitment and to ensure that folks that do sit on the board reflect and represent the communities that we serve is like, it's such an important piece, Priscilla, what you just said, that balancing, right? To have both that internal and external perspective that allows us to think together so well, and also allows us to be morally courageous and to try different things to create a world that we haven't necessarily seen yet. And if we were just anchored internally, we might get so caught up in our own stuff that we couldn't probably see the forest for the trees, so yeah, just so much appreciation. I often refer to you all as my thought partners, because I know that I can come to the board and we can talk about hard things, and that we do intentional space holding to ensure that our relationships will stand the test of those difficult conversations and the opportunity to dream together and to vision together. So yeah, it's so yeah, I appreciate you all so much. Okay. So we often refer to ourselves as a values-driven organization. And I'm curious to know what that's been like for you, to be part of a values-driven organization, and maybe how that's allowed you to show up authentically in your roles on the board. For Trina, for you also as a staff member, as a volunteer on the crisis line, if you want to speak to those pieces as well, feel free. Priscilla, do you want to start us here?
Sure. I think that it's created that safe space to be able to share my voice and have the views and that I do, and contribute that to the table. I feel like if it was about the numbers of people that we're supporting, and how much funds that we have and what we're doing with that, and really looking at it from numbers based, then it would get lost in translation, really the bigger picture. I feel like sometimes people get so focused on, how many people do we do this for, instead of, how are we making shifts and changes in community? How are we supporting even just one person and being able to do what they need to do in their journey where they're at? And I think for us on the board, it's the opportunity to say, what is the vision in the next 5 years that's going to have us then contribute to hopefully ending sexualized violence in future be it, right? And so that vision, I think, is exciting, and it keeps me fills my cup to think we're doing something not for the sake of doing it, because it's what is that called? It's it's providing a service because there's an existence of something. It's because we want to make change to that system instead. It's not a band-aid. We're not a band-aid. That's the difference.
I think, I agree with what you're saying, Priscilla, and I think it's so true. I think it really, by saying that we really center our values, we come back to them. We don't just have them as something that we have stated. It is something that we come back to. If something feels like we're storming, or there's a challenge, or there's a tough conversation that we're having, the values are rooted in that. And it helps guide us in such an important way. And I've just seen that again and again and again. And I think that's why WAVA is able to shift quickly. I think that's why WAVA is able to take the pause when we need to. And I think it's how we hold ourselves accountable to the work that we're doing, and the survivors we're supporting, and the community that we're building. So that, to me, I think is so key and important. It's not just something that we've created one time as a community and put on our webpage. It's something that is way more for us, and we've put deep intention into that. So that's what I really do think that when we say we're a values-driven organization, that's what we mean.
Yeah, I often refer to them as my North Star, because they really do feel like an anchor and a grounding point when we think about, as we navigate different grants or different programming or different directions, we can always come back to our values to think through, whether there's alignment or whether we should be taking a gift or whatever. Then it's such a useful lens and anchor for us. And so that really supported me when I landed in the executive director position. And I was grateful that we had kind of invested in ensuring that we had values that led the organization clearly. So yeah, it's always very helpful in my role. So this year is a big year. We're turning 40. What does that feel like for you both, being on the board of an organization that's turning 40? We're going to start adulting a little bit more. And what does it feel like to be doing this right now, in this time, in this space, as we're moving into this significant milestone?
Following with your adulting kind of analogy, I think it's very reflective with the changes that are happening, because I feel like once you hit not just being excited about being an adult like you are when you're early 20s, and then 30s, you're starting to settle down and figure yourself out. By 40s, and myself being in my early 40s now, realizing that I am more value driven. Is this worthy of my time? what am I going to be doing for the next so and so years? Not thinking I have time to do this or I can explore that. It's actually getting to what is tangible and what is, going to be long term. And so I feel like that's kind of where it comes in. I feel like we're also doing that with thinking about the space and how we're creating space and the name and I feel like the next strategic plan is also going to be reflective of that. What are we doing to really ground our feet in our values, and how are we going to project that out into the world and really start to like push all of the noise aside and be authentic in ourselves, even if that makes others uncomfortable. That's what 40 feels like.
Love it.
Not feeding into the trends.
Yeah. Giving less fucks, right? That's what 40 is all about.
Exactly.
I'm happy to know that I still have a few years before I start adulting, so that's good to know in my own life. So that's great. I was like, oh, is that when you have to start? Okay, cool. Okay, good to know. Because I'm not ready yet. But no, I think 40 is just such a interesting piece. A few things come up for me. One, time's a construct. So what does that mean for us, right? When we're pushing back against these things that are built, right? So what does 40 really mean? Two, though, I think it's also really, it's astonishing. Oh, not, it then makes me take a look and go, okay, I've been a part of this organization for almost 10 years. So there's 30 years of information and history that I don't know. And that's an interesting piece. I don't want us to ever lose that piece of, and so I think that's what I kind of really like when we're coming to a big birthday or year anniversary. It takes a pause for us to look back. And it also takes a pause for us to recognize what's happening currently, which is so exciting right now. And then I really do, I think, looking forward as to, okay, what's coming, where are we? And again, it's that what you folks were both just sharing, like that we're in this space now, we know who we are. We're confident in who we are. I think there's been some amazing work in the last few years specifically that I've seen that have really, really set some roots for this organization to just continue to thrive. And throughout that time, it makes me think of 40 years of survivors that have come to us and have hopefully received the support that they've needed. And I think that's also really important because it's also then establishing us within the community and building those roots and commitment with community so they know that there's a place to go when they need us. And so I think the longer we're here, the more people are going to continue to know about us. So I think that's also important too. So there's some things that come up when I hear we're turning 40.
Yeah, reliability, the fact that we've been able to keep showing up, that we have programming that is available and keeps going is such an important part. Trina, thanks for bringing that into the conversation. Yeah, it feels like a big one. It really does. And so much has changed. I guess that's what I'm like when I think about 40. I think about the fact that it's only been 40 years in some ways that conversations about sexual violence and rape culture like were even possible for people, and just how far we've come, where it was like people were doing unpaid work off the side of their desks, just trying to survive by like unearthing the reality of women's experiences as the beginnings of our organization, and just how fundamental that was to like building feminist community in Vancouver and across Canada. It's kind of wild to think about those things, because although we're going to be 40 seems old-ish, it's also like a blip in time, and so I know it's okay for I'm 45. We're in our youth still, but really, like, it's kind of kind of wild to think about how we've come from a time where people couldn't even talk about it, to now, being so present in the community, and particularly over the past 7 or 8 years, particularly with Me Too, having this like cultural tipping point where now, all of these conversations are front and center. And so what an exciting time to be part of this movement. It's very exciting. Okay. I am curious about what you're excited about in this next year for the organization, in the next 5 years or 10 years. Are there things that are front and center for you that you feel really excited about being a part of or watching from afar? Yeah, what's exciting you?
So I think definitely coming up, like we've got some exciting stuff coming up. And I think I can say this, we have a new name coming. I'm not gonna say what, but a new name is coming. We're kind of relooking at ourselves, understanding how we can become more inclusive with our name, and creating space for folks to really see themselves in what we offer, and can actually use the services that we use. I'm excited for a new space. I think that's fantastic. Our staff, our volunteers, our survivors deserve that. And so I'm so excited that is coming. And so that's just kind of in the next year, which is amazing. And then beyond that, I think it's going to continue. And it's so interesting when we talk about 5-10 years and what does that actually mean when we're like looking into the future and stuff like that. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to hold. Look how much has happened in the last 3 years, right? That none of us could have ever possibly predicted. So I just think I really, for me personally, I think with anything, I'm always like, okay, what's the next year? And then how can we support this? And yet at the same time, still ensure that we have that growth, and that come back. I think probably coming back to our values will help us in that sense. Oh, and I was gonna say one more thing, and I forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, I think that's kind of where my mind goes for the future. Oh yeah, no, and then for me also, it's gonna be weird because I'm stepping down from the board after 7 years at the end of this year, and so I'm gonna be in a different role. I definitely will not leave the organization, if what some folks see, but I can see myself. I'll definitely continue being a donor. I think that's really important to me. I will definitely continue to be involved in some way. Don't know what that is yet, but that's going to be also shift too, to see how people come and go with an organization, but you kind of try and stay connected to something that means so much. So that's what the next little bit brings.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying you're not allowed to go anywhere. Neither of you are allowed to go anywhere. So that's just I am excited at what you mentioned about the space and about the name. And it's not even just that it's a space and it's new and it's exciting, but it's space that's going to create space. It's changing space. It's being a leader in what actually does it look like to have an inclusive space with, non-gendered washrooms, with looking at medicines, with looking at how we can now create a space that's going to look different, and however that ends up looking. And when folks walk in and they're seeking support, what is that going to look like? Because space says a lot. That introduction, that face-to-face, all of that means something. And I feel like this is going to be an opportunity to say things can be done differently than what everyone's used to. And for the staff and the volunteers, that it can look different, it can feel different, and designed in that vision and view. But then with the name, we have naming ceremonies in our cultural ceremonies, and a name being given to you, a name being chosen, a name being changed, that shift, that coming of age. That's what that feels like, that coming of age, because that's another step of that kind of we've outgrown somewhat what we've known. There's still a foundation there, but we have now learned and unlearned some things that are now going to contribute to who we're going to become in that next 5 to 10 years, and how that's going to reflect how we're going to support people, how we're going to engage in advocacy. And that's where I would really be excited to see with these new kind of proposed changes, and people seeing and hearing more about what we can do, and how it's possible, and how hopefully in this industry other folks will take that lead and say, okay, now what can we do, because we're seeing this is actually a pretty good direction, and stop being uncomfortable with some of these changes.
Love it. I'm so excited about the remembering aspects, the pieces of living into our values, and what that really looks like in programming, and also just recognizing how deeply we've been impacted by the kind of nonprofit industrial complex, and how so many of our programs in the past have reflected what contracts kind of cookie cutter type of outputs of what sexual assault survivors need. And so getting the opportunity to dream and have like a remembering of what does bring healing for people, and that it doesn't always need to look like X, Y, and Z, and exploring those pieces is really exciting for me. And then I think, yeah, dreaming about ways that we can continue to increase survivors' access to post-assault care that they so desperately need, that they can't always get in the systems that are currently functioning in our world. And so whether that's our medical clinic, or whether that's other opportunities like retreats on the land, it's all really exciting alongside of what you've both spoken about as well. So many exciting things. So many. Okay, well, we're getting close to our time, but I have a couple of maybe rapid-ish fire questions to ask you that came from our socials. Feel free to answer in as much depth or not as you like. So our first one was dreaming big. What does your ideal future free of violence look like? That's not a small question, but if you just have a couple of thoughts on that and you'd like to share it.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. There's just, when you think about it, it's free of violence. I think of it being taking it out of TV, taking it out of social media, taking it out of music, that there's this perpetuation of colonization and patriarchy and white supremacy that's embedded in everything that we do. And I feel like this dismantling of systems in the way they're designed would be really exciting, because to remove the violence, it's removing that inequity, that injustice for all. And I feel like the world would be a much safer place for everyone when we start to dismantle those systems. And I feel like it would be amazing to be able to have folks not look at what a child is wearing and base judgments on that of the child or of the parents. And, where people are free to express themselves without consequence of fear of being harmed. That's, yeah. And you just think about, like, and I hope it's okay to say this, but you think about the platform that we're even on right now, and a lot of the games that are being played on this platform, how much violence there is in the games. and thinking about what entertainment factor goes into some of the violence that happens. But I know that there is like certain monitors on certain games that you can't play because they're aware that this is not acceptable. But I feel like there's other ways that could be addressed as well when it comes to how we express ourselves as a society. It's not platforms, it's society and what we're drawn towards. And so once we remove that from the equation of being okay, then what are we left with and where's the world going to grow? I think we'll grow into kindness, really.
It's a small question. It's a small question. I'm picturing Anna Sewell does so much amazing work, and I'm just picturing their staircase towards a utopia, right? There's a staircase of oppression, and there's I forget what the other way is called, but it's that way that we can move into this utopia that we live in, where we're free of violence. So that's just what I'm picturing right now when that question came up. I think, dreaming big, what does that look like? It's someone walking into a space and feeling safe every time, all the time, continuously. And not just walking into a space, but on your phone, being in space on your phone, being on space on the internet, being space in a game, like you were just saying, Priscilla, right? Where people can enter into a space and they know they're not going to receive harm, because the work has been done to allow them to both see themselves reflected in whatever space they are, to feel like they can be who they want to be, however that might be, and just be authentically themselves. Where those spaces I find still are so rare, where you can walk into a space and be like, oh, like I'm good here. This is great. Like I feel so grounded. So I think that like a world without violence, that's what people are going to be experiencing. That's a small piece of the answer to the question.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah. In The Body Is Not an Apology, Sonia Renee Taylor's book, at one point in there, she talks about being at lunch with a group of Black women and femmes, and somebody chimes in like, how are we ever going to change the world if we're never spending time imagining what a future, like our futurism and what we actually want looks like? We spend so much time talking about all of the garbage fire of the world. We never spend the time talking about what that beautiful future looks like. So thanks for the person that asked the question. Thanks for going there with me. I think for me, I just think about the bliss that I see on people's faces when they can truly be their most authentic self, and where they've been able to unlock that sense of being able to love themselves and love others because they've been able to unlock that. And I think about like spreading that all over the place. And balance also really resonates for me, just that we've been so out of balance with the earth, with the animals, with how we're caring for the bees and the planet. It's such an important part for us to be reaching for balance, and caring for, having compassion and care. So important. So cheers to that.
We'll just throw that in the strategic plan. We'll be good.
Yes.
It's in our tenure. We're
World
fine.
peace.
Yes.
The classic
Dalya's
pageant
like,
answer.
I want world peace.
World peace. Okay, here's a juicy one. How do you handle mistakes you've made?
This one's, I love this question because it's just, again, it's so, I work for post-secondary and I do equity, diversity, inclusion work. So I'm joking with some of my colleagues where I'm like, I'm always sitting in discomfort now, because by sitting in that discomfort, I'm in a space where I just want to continually be learning. And yet, as a recovering perfectionist, as I like to say with myself, right, trying to push back against that white supremacy characteristic of perfectionism that's been taught to me so heavily, that equals discomfort, because you're doing something that you don't want to do. So when people ask, like, what do you do when you make a mistake, right? I think it's so important, because I think the first thing that a lot of us have that reaction is we want to be perfect. So our first reaction is, oh, I didn't make a mistake. I clearly couldn't have possibly made this mistake. So it's reteaching myself on what's that response. And so for me, I'm really trying to acknowledge what mistakes and how that's a gift. So in the morning, when I'm doing my small meditation in the morning, I breathe in mistakes and I breathe out perfectionism, to breathe in the permission to give myself every day to make mistakes. I've been doing that for about a year now. And the shift that has happened for me has been really important. And now when I make a mistake, if I notice that shame's coming in, Brené Brown and all of her teaching on shame, right? When I notice that coming in, I go, no, it's okay. I made a mistake. Okay, what did I learn so I can do better next time? So it's not that I'm making an excuse to not, I can make mistakes. It's fine. No. It's okay. I've made a mistake. Cool. I've just had such a great gift to learn so I can do better next time. So that's the way I kind of am trying to embrace mistakes. I think it's going to be a journey I'm always going to be on, but that's what that question means to me.
I love that. I think that's something that I want to start to take on myself. And I find that I'm really honestly in a place of trying to be okay with mistakes, and I mean, it's weird because it's like that saying, those who can do, those who can't teach, because a lot of my workshops I talk about, when you're going through this learning and unlearning process of colonization and like decolonizing yourself, and it takes making those mistakes to be able to say, okay, now we're going to do this differently. Okay, apologize, where and when needed, as long as it's genuine and authentic. And I'm so afraid of making mistakes. I'm afraid of how I'm perceived when I make mistakes. I think as an Indigenous person, there's this level of where you need to be able to be seen or heard. And I'm always afraid of then being like discounted and discredited and pushed aside as like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And I like working on my second book. That's a plug for my book, Mental Health in the Workplace. My editor is just like, send me stuff. But I'm always afraid if I just write what I want to write and then send it, I'm supposed to just send, and then they send it back, send it back. But I get so afraid that if I say something and she's like, no one else is going to see it, I'm like, but you're going to see it. And I'm afraid of what that's going to look like. But I'm learning to be okay with that. It's a vulnerable place to be. I think that's what it is. And I just want to say that I think that WAVA's done really well in role modeling and how to own mistakes, how to apologize, how to grow from things, how to go, oh, I didn't know that, but I know this, or I did know that, but oops, I didn't, this. And really being vulnerable with community and being able to show actions. That's the thing too, when you think about the cycle of violence, right? You could say as much as you want to say, but unless you're doing something and making the changes to not do that again, then you don't know if it's going to be genuine or real or not. It could just be, I'm going to say this because I got to say it. When Black Lives Matter was happening, everyone's like, I'm going to put out a statement with an organization saying that we support Black Lives Matter because that's what we should do, as opposed to saying we generally want to contribute to community in good ways, and acknowledge that there's hurt, and that whatever we could do in showing up. And I feel like WAVA has done really well in showing up in that. So I'm going to learn from being a board member what it's like to hold myself accountable and learn how to do these things and not be as afraid. But I think until society changes and there isn't as much pressure on BIPOC folks, I can't be there yet.
That's so real, Priscilla. Thanks for saying that. Because we're not all judged the same for our mistakes, and we don't get to be all as free to be vulnerable as we want. There are different stakes for different folks. Excuse me. I'm going to have a slight coughing fit for a moment.
Take the time you need.
Resisting perfectionism. I was just going to share that for me, mistakes also, I think Trina, as somebody who has been recovering perfectionist as well, and recognizing for me, like doing the body scan and recognizing how rigid I can become in the face of a mistake because of that spiraling of shame and what I instantly make meaning of for myself about my own worth and whether I'm smart enough or good enough and all of those things that go alongside of making what dominant culture has told us making mistakes means. But the fascinating thing, I think, is thinking about my values of collaboration and how deeply I love collaboration and how I don't want to be cruising the world on my own in a little bubble, and how important community is for me, and just how thinking that we have to get it all right all the time and never be able to learn from anybody else is like so contradicting to those values that I hold. And so I try to remind myself of that I don't want to do life alone, and I don't want to have all the answers, and I do want to be like intra-connected and intra-dependent with people that I love and care about. So it also helps as well. Okay.
So I've been doing a lot of painting recently. So that's just the Bob Ross's happy little trees. I'm gonna put a happy little tree right here.
Love it. Okay, next question from the public. What are some of the most memorable moments of your work with WAVAW so far?
I think one to think about is actually my interview. When Trina said interview, I was thinking interview. And it was so funny because I remember that so clearly because I was like, they're going to push me at the door right now. Even though they didn't, because it was the right fit. You ask, what does feminism mean to you? How are you a feminist? I'm like, I'm not a feminist. What are you talking about? This is so colonial and it makes me uncomfortable and I don't like it. And you both were like, good. And I'm like, okay, so intersectional feminism, if you had to put a name on it. And so I feel like that was one of the most memorable because I'm like, okay, now I know that this is a safe space to be in. And I think another is just being so cared for, like after I had a go-to, as you see here, we had a board meeting and Dalya, you're pushing cushions together and laying a go-to down when he fell asleep in this little makeshift baby bed. And you're all like, no, bring him, it's fine. That for me just felt like I can be here as a new mom and still feel like I'm not being an inconvenience as some places and spaces and people in society make babies out to be and new parenting out to be. So that felt really good.
I have to acknowledge this is a really tough question for me because I've had so many phenomenal memorable moments. We were talking before with the recording. I was like, oh, this one or this one or this one. And so I'm going to kind of go a bit abstract and say, I think it's all the memories that I've had, all the memories that have to come because of the friendships I've built. You know, just recently in the last like 6 months, you know, I've gone trick-or-treating, you know, with a Gutu and you, Priscilla, like that, like means that like that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for WAVA. I was able to attend a past board member's wedding. I was able to just this past weekend hang out with Jazz and go to the culture crawl. So like it's those moments that continue to bring because of the connections that I've built through WAVA, and the relationships that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life. And I think that's, to me, those memorable pieces that just stick. And I will say one more, I think that's really important. I will never forget the first time that I signed a card and used they them pronouns in brackets next to it. The first time I ever did that was at WAVA because I felt like I could. And that is a huge part of my journey. So thank you.
Oh, that's so nice.
Mhm.
All of this warms my heart so much. Yeah, community is so important for our lives and for us to be seen. And yeah, I just went down to the new space, and one of the people who I started working with and has been a part of my journey since the beginning of time at WAVA works in our new building in another organization. And I was like able to call her and have her come down and give her big hugs, and she's so excited that we're going to be there. And that's a relationship that I've had since like 2003. And yeah, it's so meaningful to be part of community. So thanks for those memories. Okay, we've gotten to our very last question, which I think is like a very sweet question and very validating, perhaps. So the question is, why is WAVA so awesome? WAVA is also always doing amazing work and breaking ground. How do you do it? How do we do it? What does it take? What's the recipe?
We listen to survivors. I really think that's a huge foundation and a huge root of why we do what we do. We create space for people to tell us until when we listen of what we can do for them. And I think that's why we shift into the spaces that we do, and we recognize what we need to leave behind and unlearn and what we need to relearn and move forward in.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it also goes back to that value space, walking in your values helps keep that awesomeness going because it's real. I think people like real. It feels good, it feels safe, it feels comfortable. And I feel like the more vulnerable and real WAVA could be. And that's the folks also, right? So it's the volunteers, it's the staff, it's you as the ED, it's the board. All these people make up what the space is. You could have a name, you could have a building, you could have whatever. But if you don't have the people who are genuine and sincere and wanting to make change or wanting to be supportive or however people come to contribute, then you don't have anything. And I feel like the awesomeness is just a reflection of the community and what everyone brings into the space.
Yeah, and I totally agree with both of you, and I'll also say that I think we've been clear that we're not going to let fear stop us, and that being morally courageous has been a really important piece, that we don't fall back into what we think is just expected of us, and that we take calculated and good risk to align ourselves with our values, and that feels really important for us as we navigate our way on this journey. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time. if we want to close here, close our circle, I'll just invite you to maybe share one thing that you're gonna walk away thinking about this evening as you go on your way. And then we'll wrap our time together.
I think that the thing that comes to mind is, I know that, earlier I had mentioned, the platform, and like this is a shift into a new platform of being able to reach out to folks and have folks to be supportive. And I strongly appreciate the community here who are doing fundraisers and who are raising awareness and who are being supportive of the organization and everything that we're doing, and who are sitting and listening to this conversation. And I feel like as we grow and learn, we're going to meet new people, and some of these relationships that are being built are going to have us be able to bring other people into the space that we may not have been able to before. I appreciate those relationships. I appreciate the folks who have reached out and have made this possible, and for us to be able to go, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share a bit about the journey that is WAVAW and my small little piece of that, of this community, amazing community. Again, another huge shout out to our staff, our volunteers. I can never thank you folks enough for all that you do. So I always like to say that. And then that extends to our community today, to where all you folks who are watching this, who are taking the time to learn more about this organization, I think is amazing. I agree. I echo what Priscilla was just saying. Like, thank you for really investing in this work to create a safer space online and within your communities online. And I just really, a huge shout out to our all of our community members that are actively involved, both on here and externally in other ways too. We have such great partnerships, through globally. I really truly think so. Just thank you for folks for investing your time in this organization when we're about to turn 40. And thank you, Priscilla and Dalya. I could talk to you both for hours. So appreciate this space.
Yeah. Okay, well, again, thank you so much. Big, huge virtual hugs and loads of gratitude to you both. And thanks for being willing to come and be with me tonight to have this chat. We will see you very soon.
That's good. Thanks, folks.
Bye.